When I knew that I was flying China Southern for the very first time, I thought I'd jump onto YouTube to have a look at what other people thought. But I found some of the reviews a little bit confusing. Dan was pleasantly shocked. Ryan SoFly thought they were surprisingly good. Jaden gave them a, but then others didn't have it so good. Great potential, but many problems. One passenger had the flight from hell, and someone even thought that the salad on board was not the best. So is China Southern shockingly pleasant, surprisingly good, or thumbs up? Or do their salads just leave you wanting? Well, I'm flying China Southern today from Beijing across to Tokyo, and I thought I'd bring you along with me so we can both find out. Because China Southern is an airline that actually flies to quite a few cities back home in Australia, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, even Adelaide, Darwin, chances are if you're flying between Australia and China, you will come across them at some point. And they're not a small airline either. In fact, China Southern is the biggest airline in China. Well, kind of. In fact, more on that in a second. So naturally, I was curious to understand why the experience seems to vary so much from people who fly on China Southern. Now, I'd originally booked an economy class seat on this flight, but at the gate I asked about an upgrade and was told I could do that, but for a cost. The economy ticket cost me $368.10, and I could upgrade to business class for an additional $344.03. So I went ahead and did that. And before boarding, because I had a bit of time here in Beijing's Daxing airport, and because I was now flying business class, I thought I'd take a quick look around China Southern's business class lounge. What do we got here? Actually, quite a nice little space in here. There's a few private areas, like you can see that I'm in at the moment. There, no one there, so I can film. Yeah, another little area like the same one that I'm in over this wall as well. And the nice thing about this part here is then you kind of are looking out over the huge complex of the airport. You can see for miles. It really doesn't feel like you're close in. Well, not miles, but you know, you can see further than you can in most other airports. There is one very small gripe that I just want to get off my chest though, not just about this lounge, but about this airport as a whole, and I've kind of noticed it in Shanghai when I was there yesterday as well, and some of the hotels that I've stayed at in China over the last few days. The air conditioning isn't really ever turned up that high, so you can kind of feel it, but it's also not strong enough, so it just makes places like this quite hot, but also worse than that, quite humid. But the humidity in here is actually quite high, so it feels like everything feels a bit sweaty. Now I appreciate, of course, this is a massive indoor space to fill full with cold air 24/7 and keep everyone at exactly the right temperature. I understand that. Just a little bit more air conditioning would be nice. That's all. Also, I only got this toast because I wanted to show you that they printed the China Southern logo on it. After a quick post-lounge Starbucks visit, I made my way to the gate to board my flight to Japan with China's biggest airline. But what actually makes an airline big? Because depending on how you measure it, you can make almost any airline sound like the biggest in the world. Take Turkish Airlines, for example. You could say they're the biggest because they fly to more countries than anyone else. American Airlines could be the biggest airline in the world based on the number of passengers they carry each year. And using that metric, Ryanair would be the world's third largest airline. But in aviation, because so many things are revenue focused, we often use a revenue-based metric to determine how big an airline actually is. And one that's often quoted is something called available seat miles, or ASM. ASM gives you an idea of the revenue potential for an airline, and it's essentially how many seats an aircraft has available for passengers, multiplied by how far that aircraft flies, and then if you calculate that across the entire fleet of aircraft for an airline, it gives you the airline's total ASM. And that gives you a much clearer picture of total capacity and, to some extent, size. And yes, according to ASM, China Southern is the largest airline in China. Interestingly, still makes it smaller than Ryanair though, but understanding that China Southern is a big airline does make you begin to realise why some of those online reviews can be so inconsistent.
Hello,
Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Hello, thank you. Thank you. China Southern could also be considered big simply based on the size of the fleet it operates. Big, huge big seat. Huge big seat. Look. Look how big it is. Which includes Airbus A319s, A320s, A321s, A330, A350s, Boeing 737s, 787s and 777s, and even 10 Comac C919s. So it's a pretty broad mix of aircraft operating everything from short domestic hops through to long-haul international flights. And so when you combine the size of the fleet with the variety in aircraft types and the sheer scale of the network, hundreds of destinations across China and around the world, with the variances in crew and the product on board those aircraft, it does start to make it clearer why the reviews online of China Southern are actually so mixed. Because even though it's all under the same China Southern brand, the experience you get might actually vary quite a lot depending on which flight you're currently on.
The flight time is 3 hours. It is our pleasure to greet our staff club representative, the entire cabin crew and on board with us. To avoid injuries during turbulence, please take care of your passengers and children and fasten your seatbelts on flight. We can remind you that in order to ensure quiet and comfortable flight environment, we hope you enjoy flight. Thank you.
Because of the late upgrade to business class, I was told that I wouldn't be served a meal on board as they didn't have one loaded for me. But the flight was only a couple of hours and they did give me complimentary drinks and a few snacks, so I was fine. The A330 I'm flying actually has the older style 222 business class, but there are some refurbished A330s flying with China Southern with a newer staggered 121 configuration. And if you can check ahead, I would thoroughly recommend try and get the 121 configuration, especially if you do want to sit by the window and you can have a table between you and the aisle, because that gives you a lot more privacy than the 22 I was in, especially if you're travelling on your own. It wasn't long before the crew started coming through the cabin to prepare the aircraft for our landing into Haneda, an interesting airport which opened back in the 1930s with just a single runway built on the edge of Tokyo Bay. But as Tokyo grew, so did the airport, and instead of moving it, just as happened with other city airports around the world like Sydney Kingsford Smith for example, instead they just literally expanded it out into the water. To cope with the growth of Tokyo, the city actually tried to solve the problem by also building a completely new airport, Narita International Airport, which opened in 1978 but sits a lot further out from the city. It is physically larger in terms of land area and it was designed to handle a lot more long-haul international traffic, whilst Haneda was going to focus more on domestic. But over time that plan didn't really work because of the proximity that Haneda has to the city centre itself, with passengers preferring to land at an airport which is physically closer to Tokyo City itself. And so Haneda continues to expand. That long runway that you can see built out over the water, that's runway 0523, that was only added back in 2010, all built on reclaimed land using a mixture of materials actually, a lot of which was actually taken out of Tokyo Bay itself. But for us today we're landing on the northernmost and actually the shortest runway here at Haneda Airport, runway 22.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tokyo. The outside temperature is 28 degrees Celsius.
That is a pretty good view from my hotel room for the night. One interesting point about China Southern that I haven't mentioned so far is that China Southern actually recently announced that they were looking to sell their entire fleet of Boeing 787-8 Dreamliners. They think the wide-body aircraft are just not economical enough to operate. Maybe they'll move on to something like the Comac aircraft in the future as well. But the fact they're doing that and the experience that I've had on board today, I keep coming back to one word, and that word is control. It's really interesting flying on a flight with an air marshal on board, someone walking up and down the aisle of the aircraft with like a body camera recording everything, signs on the wall saying that videotaping is happening, knowing that you're being filmed, watched and recorded whilst you're just sitting there basically trying to enjoy a flight. That level of control is something quite unfamiliar to someone like me who doesn't ordinarily fly within China. And then there's the control from things like the seatbelt sign being on all the way up to the cruise, and to be honest, even when there wasn't any turbulence, that sign was still kept on and people were encouraged to stay in their seats. Very, very different to flying that I'm used to in somewhere like Australia, where you will literally take off and a couple of thousand feet up, if it's a nice clear day, then the seatbelt sign goes off, people get up, wander around, go to the toilet, put Qantas pyjamas on. That sort of freedom within the cabin of the aircraft is very different to what I experienced today on China Southern. But of course, that's the brilliant thing about travel, is you get to see how people do things differently in different parts of the world. And I've enjoyed flying with China Southern and learning about them. The one thing though that I will say, which I didn't actually resolve in this video because of that late upgrade to business class, I never managed to get my China Southern salad, and I didn't actually answer the big question that we're all wondering today: is the China Southern salad the best? Thank you as always for watching, and hopefully I'll see you on the next flight.